Hello all, my name is Daniel Backer and welcome to Write Better Stories. I'm going to keep this one pretty brief, but I just got to see Memories of Murder by the guy who directed Parasite, and it was really cool. It was the first movie that I've seen in a movie theater since the beginning of the pandemic, I'm pretty sure. So there were a whopping 8 people in the audience, and I have allergies here in Missouri, and so I coughed one time. And stifled coughs for the rest of the film, but I actually have a negative COVID test that I could show you, so just didn't want to freak anyone out who was in there with me. So this was an awesome film, and it wasn't really what I expected, but it had a trailer that came up on YouTube the other day and just like really grabbed me, specifically just the way that it's shot. Like the colors, I don't really know the words for the cinematography terms, but it was just like very beautifully shot in the trailer, so I made it a point to see it at my local movie theater. And I'm going to basically give some spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen it, I would turn it off. It's basically a true crime film, but with a lot of creative liberties, and the basic formula is definitely something that you've probably seen before, where there are like 2 main cops who have pretty different ways of approaching their investigations. One of them is like a cool cop from the city who at various points in the film says that documents don't lie, and so he's kind of about like the hard facts. And at one point somebody comments that he has a lot of style, and so that didn't come across to me that hard, but I at least took that line to be that he was supposed to be this like kind of cool cop from the city that showed up in this more, he showed up in a village, and the cop that was already in the village just didn't really care for his city slicker ways. So then the cop that was already in the village claimed that he could just look at somebody in their eyes, and with his intuition and folk wisdom is the term that he uses at one point, he can smell if they're the perpetrator or not. And he also brings up at one point that it's like in America, since they have so much land, they have to like use their ideas and these mental gymnastics in order to solve the crimes, whereas his folk wisdom can tease out the murderer. And over the course of the film, both of these guys end up being wrong in their ways, and they sort of go through a switch in between them. And so like the folk wisdom guy is not above just like making somebody confess even if they didn't actually do it, and having his like muscle beat the shit out of them until they're just so dazed that they will admit to the crime. And toward the end, the city slicker, who was much more about the documents, he is now willing to do this, and he beats the shit out of the guy that he thinks is the murderer. But then the folk wisdom guy, he gets the documents from America, and he's like, hey, look, we have documents now. And so like it's not the most revolutionary thing in the world, but what's great about this film is it's just like really, really well done, that they have these 2 cops with these 2 perspectives, and they end up switching perspectives by the end of the film. However, the documents end up saying that the semen stain that they found on the victim did not belong to the guy that the city slicker cop was beating the shit out of. And so then his big character change at the end is him being like, I don't care what the documents say, this is the guy. And then the folk wisdom guy like looks in his eyes, and he's like, I'll be able to tell by looking into his eyes. And then he finally admits upon looking into his eyes, he's like, I don't fucking know. I don't know if this is the murderer or not. And then they let him go, but they don't take his handcuffs off, which kind of sucks for that guy. And so then, I'm trying to remember, ironic for a movie called Memories of Murder. Toward the end, the folk wisdom guy, he ends up leaving the police force, and he gets like a new job selling, I think they're like coffee makers or something like that, but some sort of like sales position. And then he's still kind of up to his old ways, and he like interrogates his son about whether or not he was up late playing video games or not, and like wants to look into his eyes. And his wife is like, leave him alone. If he said he didn't do it, he didn't do it. But then he stops by the initial crime scene that started the film, just for old time's sake, I guess, and like looks into the little drainage ditch. And this little girl comes up and is like, "What are you doing?" And she mentions that there was a guy that had come and looked into that spot too. So then the wheels are turning in the folk wisdom cop's head, being like, "Oh, well, surely this is the murderer returning to the scene of the crime." And so he asks the little girl, like, "Well, what was he like? What did he look like?" And she's like, "Well, he was ordinary, just a regular guy," which is not very good evidence at all. So, and then, actually, the last shot of the film is then him looking into the camera, which I think, like, my initial thought when that happened was that it was almost this, like, meta thing if he's like, "It was you, the audience member," or, like, maybe you have those latent desires. But then, like, that's not really supported by the end of the movie. That was just kind of, like, my first thought. But definitely the main theme as I saw it was just the sort of, like, impotence of an investigation of the search for truth, is that these guys don't really have a lot to go on, and so then they start turning to these like unconventional ways and silly ways of teasing out the truth. And so like they consult a shaman at one point. Since they don't find any pubic hair on the victims, the folk wisdom cop concludes that it must be a monk who has shaved his body, and so he like goes to a bathhouse and like looks at all of the guys' pubic area to see if there's any like hairless men there. And there's a couple other in that regard of just these like kind of silly things that they do that just like seem very obviously like something that's not going to lead to the murder. And it kind of reminded me of Twin Peaks, when the detective comes out, and like it's been a while since I've seen it, but I know they like go to the woods and he does all these kind of like silly maneuvers in order to like tease out who the murderer is. And so overall this movie just like checked a lot of boxes for me. I really like those noir crime films, and especially ones that can be kind of silly about the way that they go about the investigation, because on one level it's just like entertaining and funny, but then also I think it just kind of makes us take a look at the way that we search for truth, and that sometimes when there's no empirical facts or evidence to go on, we can occasionally, consult shaman or try to elevate our minds to like religious impulses, or end up at bathhouses to look for answers, as one does, and just other silly things like that. So it ends up being like a comment on truth and investigations. But that being said, I wouldn't say that this is an extremely thematic, philosophical film. One of its greatest strengths is just that it's this, like I said, very well executed crime film following these cops and their different perspectives, and then their character shifts where they sort of switch places by the end of the film, and just the direction, just like the camera movements and the colors are really striking. Like at the beginning of the film, it's kind of sunny with this like golden field of wheat, and then it descends into like basically grays and dark greens for the rest of the film, and then at the end it's kind of back into that like sunny golden wheat vibe again. And I think that's about all that I have to say about it. I highly recommend seeing it if you decided to watch this, and let me spoil it for you, because it's just like, it's really well done. I'm not sure it's quite as like delicately crafted as like Parasite was, which I really enjoyed, because Parasite felt like both an artsy film, but something with also like a very meticulously rendered plot that really paid off in a satisfactory way. Memories of Murder, I don't think has quite as satisfying of a payoff, but that being said, it wasn't really disappointing. After showing that it investigates the sort of like feeble, impotent police department, it's sort of expected that they would not reveal who the murderer is. And then I didn't look up the actual story it's based on either, but I assume they didn't find the murderer either, because that'd be like a weird choice for the director to just like not show who it is if they actually found him in real life. But anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. Thanks for checking out my vid, and yeah, I hope it helps you write better stories. Goodbye.